You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again today, just like any other time, we have another show lined up for y'all today. Today, we have a true honor talking to our guest today, Hajim. He is going to share with us his powerful life story. This guy is no stranger to being a successful professional. So we're going to learn all of the secrets that he has to share with y'all, because I know everybody with this level of success has definitely had some adversity that he had to overcome. And everybody knows that if you have a story, I got to have you on the show. So first and foremost, Ed, I thank you for taking time on being with us today. How you doing so far?
I'm doing good, and thank you for having me.
So for our audience, kind of share with us your professional background, because when I looked at your resume, it's been a popular theme. It's going to take me a whole show just to unpack what you've been able to do.
Don't do that. We'll make it really short. I started out as a chemical engineer. I was in the United States Navy as a naval officer for 3 years. Then I went to work in the plastics industry as an applications research engineer at a company called Hercules Powder Company. Then I went to business school. And after business school, I changed professions from engineering to finance and spent basically the better part of 50 plus years on Wall Street in 3 or 4 different firms, ending up the chairman and CEO of a small firm, which we grew about 20 times in a 10-year period. We sold it first to Xerox. We bought it back. We sold to a large Dutch company. And that kind of brought my business career to a close. And then I became the chairman of the board of trustees at the University of Rochester, which went on for 8 years. And that was the story. I think the other additional thing is that I founded a golf course in Nantucket. And a golf course is one thing, but we've now turned that into an institution. It's now the largest charity on the island. And the most important thing I've done is I have married for 59 years. I have 3 children and 8 grandchildren.
Congratulations on that. That is something to definitely be proud of, and I'm happy for you. When you look at the journey that you had to take, I appreciate your service, serving your country. When you look at the opportunities that you've been able to have in building and scaling up businesses and opportunities, what's some of the core elements that allowed you to be grounded as you kept striving for greatness?
Well, as you know from reading my biography, if you do, the book is called On the Road Less Traveled. I started out in foster homes and orphanages. I always tell the story to shorten it up that nobody came to my grammar school graduation or my high school graduation or my college graduation or my graduate school graduation. So, but I learned from that experience that these disadvantages which I had, going from foster home to foster home, made me adaptable. It gave me resilience. Resilience is like a muscle. The more you use it, the better off you are. And of course, it gave you a certain amount of self-confidence after you get through that period. But I did have a background which was very difficult to live with in the early part of my life, because in those days, back in the 50s, people didn't, they looked kind of askance at people with backgrounds like mine. So when I went to college, I didn't tell anybody. I buried my background because I was ashamed of it. And I didn't want any special advantage because of my background.
When you look at how life just it happens, right? We don't always get to choose how it just comes our way. What allowed you to say, you know what? Despite what life has dealt me, I'm not going to allow that to stop me to make progress.
Well, the first thing, I was brought up in Catholic foster homes. And they laid in, the nuns in those days laid in a very simple process. If you did the right things, you ended up in the right place. If you did the wrong things, you ended up in the other place. They also taught you what I could call the golden rule, which really carries you through your whole life: do unto others. And you'd be surprised how a simple rule like that is very good for a business executive. And when you're dealing with lots of people, as I did, my last company, at Rochester, I had 30,000 employees. My last company on Wall Street, we had 800. So that's the first thing. The second thing was, my father, although he couldn't really take care of me because he was a radio operator aboard a ship. And he had some very bad background. He had some bad problems in the 20s when he lost all his money. He sent me messages constantly that I was a good person and that I would succeed. So I had somebody in my corner. We spent very little time together my first 18 years. Then finally, which is kind of funny, and I've only learned about this by writing a book and thinking about it, is in those days, the movies had heroes, people that seemed to do the right thing. When they did the right thing, they did well. So that was kind of, on Saturday, that was a big thing for young people. So that carried me through. And I really, for whatever reason, had a drive that I really wanted to take advantage of what America had to offer. And I've been very, very lucky in being able to live the American dream. I mean, it's very unusual. That's what drove me. I really wanted to be better than I was. I always had a problem with being an orphan and going to foster homes. I always asked, why me? So I overcame that, and I wanted to overcome it. And now I've been able to give back, and that's even very satisfying.
When you look at your mile markers throughout your life, when you were a little bit younger, prior to military, prior to businesses and Wall Street, what was some of the things that you noticed when you were younger, as far as like how the world works and just your environment?
Well, when I got transferred to the second orphanage in Yonkers, New York, I went into a high school, a public high school, where 80% of the kids went to private colleges. Most of the kids in the orphanage either went to work or went to a public institution in New York City. And it seemed to me that was a secret, was to get away from your present background and go to a private college. I didn't know how I was going to get there. I didn't have the money. So I put my head down and I became a very good student in math and science and a varsity athlete. I also worked in the afternoons in order to save money for that college experience. And therefore, that was one of the real signals. The other thing is I developed a feeling for people that education really was the solution. And I thought, as I read biographies of people, I found that the real thing that changed their lives was the education that they got in most cases. And so I said, I'm going to get an education. I'm going to a private college where I can basically excel and also associate with all those other people who are going to private colleges. I felt that would put me in that arena. It wasn't an easy transition because I didn't have the clothes. I didn't have the background. I arrived at college and in my black leather jacket, and I got rejected by all the fraternities the first year. But as I tell people, the food was better at college than it was at the orphanage, so I thought I was better off.
When you see how you just listen to you tell your story, when you see how you've been able to make it against all odds, you touched on how your father, you did have the closest relationship, but he still was in your corner and he still saw the greatness that you had inside you.
Well, Dad, when my mother and father got divorced, my mother got custody of me, and she took me from Los Angeles to San Francisco, from Los Angeles to St. Louis, where her family was. And my father got visiting rights and $5 a week of alimony and child support. And he really couldn't do without me. That's what he said to me. So he came to St. Louis on a Sunday to visit me. And instead of taking me to a movie or to the park, he got back on Highway 66, which is on the cover of my book, and took me back to Los Angeles, called my mother and told her not to look for us, of course, breaking the law because she had custody. And then he told me that she died and I would never see her. And that's in the book, too. You'll find out what happened later on if you read the book. And so he just really couldn't do without me. He loved me more than anything else. But being a radio operator aboard a ship, he always had to go to sea. So we didn't have any relatives, but he had to leave me with, friends and neighbors. And then when the war broke out, he was either enlisted or he was drafted to become a merchant marine radio operator. And so he had to go to sea for World War II. And he put me into the Catholic welfare system. And I spent the next 5 years in 5 different Catholic welfare homes, foster homes, some of which were cold and abusive, and others were warm and caring. But he always sent letters, constantly sent letters, phone calls, telegrams. And I remember we have one letter in the book that I had to tell him. I said, Dad, I'm not that good a boy. Sometimes I'm bad, because he wouldn't put up with any time when I felt that I wasn't the best. And that was the message he kept sending me. So I find that's one of the secrets, is having someone in your corner, not necessarily your parents if you don't have any, but someone who gives you unconditional support. It's really very important. And that's, I think, again, in picking a mate, finding a partner for life, is to find someone who will support you. Not unrealistically, but support you.
Once again, listen, I'll be Focused Radio, talking to our guest today at Hajim. And when you look at the opportunities you've been blessed to have to give back, philanthropy, and just being able to be a source of inspiration to your community, did you ever thought that you'd be able to give on the scale you have been able to? Or has that always been maybe a secret ambition you wanted to do?
A dark day? The darkest day was, I guess, at high school, when I was convinced I was going to get a scholarship and didn't get it. And I had one other possibility, which was the NROTC scholarship, which they only give to 1,200 students throughout the entire country. And I was convinced I wouldn't get it. First of all, I didn't weigh enough. You had to weigh 125 pounds, and I didn't. But somehow I got that scholarship. And, when I went for my physical that morning, I had a very large breakfast. I still didn't make the 125, but the corpsman who weighed me said, "You don't make it." I said, "I have to make it." He said, "Okay." And he sent me on. But that was a very dark day. I felt that my whole plan was not going to work, but I had applied for this NROTC scholarship, and I got that. Another dark day, I guess, was at college. Having arrived, I felt, boy, I had arrived. Now I was going to be part of the group. And then I got to in those days, the first week of college was fraternity rushing. And fraternities were much more important in those days. And being rejected by all of them was a pretty dark day. But again, having grown up the way I did and having gotten through, a lot of different schoolyards and being pushed around in orphanages with the rites of passage, it wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. I could overcome it. Since I overcome those things in the past, I decided, I'd go on. And that is one of the things I try to sell young people, is that never be a victim if you can help it. Take that energy that you use as a victim and use it to find out what's next. And in all those cases, what's next was the next scholarship try. What's next was basically getting through my freshman year. And in both cases, obviously, I was lucky that I did do it.
You also, on your biography, you have held positions, senior level management positions. What was some of the skill sets that you had to acquire prior to getting those positions? And did you ever look at yourself and say, wow, we're being trusted to do a lot here?
Yeah, I continue to say wow about my career, because I kept moving up the ladder, and I ended up as a partner and on the board of directors of Lehman Brothers back when it was a famous firm. With the board of directors consisted, the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Defense, and people really. And I was the youngest member of the board of directors in its history, things like that. But I continue to take things in stride and say, just do the best job you can. And it seemed to always work out for me. But I would say that the technique that I developed was interesting. It was developed in college. Although I loved math and science, that was one of my passions. I found my passion in my junior year was to put people together to basically solve a problem or create a product or do a program. And inside that passion, I found out that what I really loved was helping people do better than they thought they could. It's a very subtle point. But if people feel that you're in their camp, you're trying to help them do better, you'd be surprised the productivity you get out of that. And in my middle career, one person came to me and said, thank me for helping him and so forth. He said, Ed, you're a success in business. He told me this. He said, because everybody feels you're in their camp, you're trying to get them to do better than they think they can. And also I learned, was later on, that the most important factor is, you can create almost anything. And this is a cliche, if you don't care who gets the credit. And always give the credit away if you can. So those are the little techniques that I learn. Accounting, that I learn about business strategy, yes. But I found that culture was almost more important than anything else. Sending a message to people that we're all in this together, we're all working to get the same problem solved, and I'm interested in you. And that helped me more than some of the techniques. Although I must admit I was pretty good on corporate strategy. I wasn't great on accounting. But no, in my book, I argue that one of the things you should do is when you find yourself with a weakness or a dislike, find a partner who does that better than you do it, or some things you can't do. So find a partner who does things you can't do, finds their partner who does things better than you can do. And I like to find partners who like to do things that I do really well that I don't want to do. And I found those partners. There's that one particular gentleman who was with me for 35 years, and he did all those things that I really didn't want to do and I couldn't do. So I think that's one of the secrets of success, is to surround yourself with partners. I found I'm only as good as the people I surround myself with. And during my career, if I had the wrong partners, I failed, or I have no partners, I failed. And if I had the right partners, I succeeded.
When you look at how you were a leader and how you were able to pull people up to their next level of their greatness, of their potential in life, personally and professionally, what's some of the traits that you try to look for in a person that says, hey, there's some untapped potential there that I need to kind of pull out?
That was one of the secrets. You came across something. You're digging into the right place. What you have to do with people is actually to find their passions and emphasize those passions, and then find if they have a weakness for the particular task that you're asking them to do. So ask them whether they want to work on it or can they work on it. So if you get someone who's capable in a particular area, but they have a certain weakness, such as they can't speak before people, or they're not good with numbers, if they're willing to work on that and they're willing to accept the fact that that's a weakness, then you obviously have someone who can be successful. Or you partner them up with someone. And I did that many times with someone who basically could do the job. In fact, is what I learned early in my career. One of my partners came to me and said, Ed, you're not that good with the numbers. That's shocking, being an engineer. And he brought up this gentleman in, this fellow who spent 35 years with me. He said, this is the person you have to have as your partner. And he was right. At first I rejected. I said, oh no, I'm good with the numbers. This person lived and breathed numbers, and he could tell me, whether we were profitable at the end of the day for a good 30 years. So it was a wonderful person. He also dealt with lots of different things. But most people, you try to look for their traits. And in many cases, what you want to find, and many of the people you work with, is people who are not good at what they're doing, and move them, because they basically hurt productivity. But the most important thing is, when you have a job, find out the characteristics of the job, the characteristics of the person, and then you got a better chance of success. But we're all packages, none of us are perfect. And each job is required as a package. So you got to find in that package, is there a weakness that you want to improve? So if the person has something and starts to prove the weakness, you have a better chance of being a success, of having this person do his job. And that is the most important thing, is have each one of your people doing the kinds of things they like to do and that they're good at. And then then you're on your way. And that's basically, in my little company, we started with 70 employees. We ended up at 800. And I always felt that they were really a happy group of people, and I didn't lose many people over the 20 years that I was with them.
Once again, listening on Refocus Radio, talking to our guest today, Ed Hajim. And when you look at confidence, that is something that can make or break a person. For you, at what point in your life did your confidence start to take off for you, in the sense that, yes, I have the ability to do this and I'm not going to self-sabotage?
I guess it was when I was at E.F. Hutton, I was doing very well. But, one of my concepts about being successful is also to find trends and cycles. Try to get the wind at your back. And they were a retail firm. They dealt just with retail clients. And they brought me in to do the institutional business. They didn't want very much of it. They wanted a little bit of it. But I found, as I was doing it over the 3-year period, that this was the future of that particular industry. The brokerage industry was going to shift in the 60s or in the 70s to a more of institutional vein. And I tried to convince the management that they should do that. They decided that they wouldn't do it. And meanwhile, a couple of other firms were doing it. And I got pulled out of there into a firm that was committed to an institutional business. And I started to recognize that what I was good at, which was required, was to kind of figure out what's next and then keep moving in that direction. And I think that's one of the other successful things, especially in today's world. Things are changing so fast. You really have to keep moving to what's next. And in fact, in my little firm, when I went from the fancy big one with the fine dining room and the big offices and so forth, the little one, I told everybody that every year we've got to come up with something that's, better. What's next? And I'm the lead director in our golf club now, and it's the same thing there. What are we going to improve in the club, make the members happy next year? Is it change the dining room a little bit, add a little more to the driving range? I think what's next is a magic word. That and thank you are my four favorite words.
I'm taking notes right now in my head. That's great. I'm glad you're sharing this with our audience. I always appreciate interviews like this where we get to understand the backstory of someone's successful life, because I think you can make a very good argument that you have been able to live a pretty successful life, and it's been because of your choices. And I want to touch on that before we close. When you look at the choices an individual makes in their lifetime, how important is it to have that North Star as a person, as far as your personal and your professional career?
In my book, I talk about the 4 parts of life: self, which you have to work on initially; family, which lasts. So what's there when everything is said and done. Work is where you make your mark and make your living. And then the last part of your life is community, and that's giving back. And I have found that has been basically, that's what people should seek for. That's your North Star, is to do enough things in life that you get a chance in your own way to give back. And being the chairman of the board of trustees at the University of Rochester, ending up with hundreds of scholarship students. They have a statue of me on the property, which is, I'm the only one in my neighborhood with a statue. But to be able to give that back, we raised more money in the 8 years I was there for scholarships, for professorships, programs, for a new children's hospital than they raised the previous 150 years combined. And by the way, the president did most of the work. I was just the chairman of the board of trustees. He was a terrific person. I just followed along with him and helped out. But we were able to really create an inflection point in a major institution which changed people's lives. And of course, what I find to be most satisfying is giving a scholarship changed my life. Giving someone who's gotten to be 17 or 18 years old, and all they need is a little bit of funds to take the next step. Boy, that is the greatest thing you can do for someone. Say, and we've done this in Nantucket, and I'll give you an example. One of the young men in our high school in Nantucket wanted to be a chef. And to go to chef school, Johnson Wells, cost $60,000 a year. And we've given him a scholarship to do that. I didn't, but the club did. And I have a scholarship student, young lady who doesn't weigh 100 pounds, and she's an optical engineering major. She's now got her PhD. And she also is a concert pianist and a concert violinist. And she stood up one day, many years ago and said, "If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here." Well, that pays for it all. And that's what I think, those 4 parts of life. You've got to concentrate on yourself. You've got to worry about your family. You've got to make your mark and make a living. But if you get a chance, you get done with those, if you get a chance to really give back, you'll find out in any small way, whatever it might be, you'll find that's the greatest satisfaction. And that should be your North Star.
When people listen to this, I hope they rewind it and watch it again, because it's one of those timeless pieces that you can always, relearn it and just kind of get those reps in, if you will, mentally. So as we close, for the young people who feel like, man, that's the kind of life I want to live, man, what's some of the fundamental building blocks that they can have branded in their mind for them to start executing today? So that way, when they're in their 30s, their 40s, 50s, they can look back and be proud of how they set their life.
I'm actually in the process of putting together, we have a template now for a course, because I think the young people should think about these things, write them down, and start testing earlier than they do. In other words, one of the concepts is that basically there are 2 kinds of education. One is teaching you how to make a living. The other one teaches you how to make a life. I don't think we do a great job in that second one, at least not formally. We do it in the dining rooms and the dormitories and so forth, but we should do it formally. And I'm pitching that to colleges now, that they will formally sit down and ask, who am I? Where do I want to go? How do I think I might get there? And if we have time, why I want to get there.
Once again, been listening to Refocus Radio, talking to our guest today, Ed Hajim. Man, it's been a masterclass this afternoon talking to you and your amazing, successful professional career, and also what you've been doing with your personal life. If you had one last thing you want to share with our audience, what would that be? And also remind our audience how they can find your book.
Well, my 3 points are: anything is possible. Education is a solution to everything. Education is a solution to almost everything. And finally, never be a victim. You can find me in the 2 books. If you put my name into Amazon, I'm the only Hajim in the world besides my children. You come up with my 2 books, On the Road Less Traveled and The Island of the 4 Ps. Both of them, by the way, if you're a listener like I am, are on Audible, and they're easy to listen to. But both those books are on Amazon. Simon & Schuster also has them. And if you go to my website, again, edhajim.com, you'll find that you may not have to read the books because my publicist has done a very robust job with that. But I really appreciate it. If you do read the book, please go to Amazon, give me a rating and a review. Makes my publisher happy. Thank you.
Well, once again, been listening to Refocus Radio, talking to our guest today, Ed Hajim. Like always, like me to everybody else, appreciate your time.
Appreciate your time, too. Have a great one.